All right, good evening. Thank you all for coming. And welcome to Politics and Prose Bookstore. My name's Rich, I'm a bookseller here. We're now hosting in-person events as well as virtual events, along with partnered and supported events, trips and classes. For a full list of everything confirmed, please go to our website, politics-prose.com. So before we get started today, I just want to ask you to please silence your cell phones so we don't disrupt the event. When we get to the time for opening the floor to questions, we've placed a standing microphone at the end of the aisle to your right, just here. Please line up at one of the mics so that everyone can hear your question, as we want it to be heard for the audio recording for the event. So we're both audio and video recording the event tonight. So you or anyone you know can watch it on the YouTube channel, the Politics and Prose YouTube channel. So following the Q&A, we'll have a signing up here at this table. So if you have not already purchased the book, you can do that down at the checkout. And we'll ask you to start the line next to the pillar. We'll come by and ask for what you want for your personalization, just to speed it up a bit. So have your books ready for us, if that's okay. So once the event is complete, we're just going to ask you to, if you can help us out a bit and just fold the chairs up, put them against a hard surface, just so it makes it a bit easier for us at the end. So without further ado, I'm very excited to welcome Stephen Markley, celebrating the release of the Deluge. So hailing from Ohio, Markley is a graduate of the prestigious Iowa Writers Workshop. His writing debut came in the form of the memoir titled Publish This Book. It was his debut novel, Ohio, which made everyone stand up and take note, and it was evident that we had a serious writer in our midst. A novel that Stephen King called The Grapes of Wrath of this generation. To lean on Mr. King a bit more, it is called The Deluge, a modern classic. So this latest effort is an impressive feat of cli-fi, in which ecological crisis looms, and I know we're all excited to hear it be discussed this evening. Cli-fi is a term I just learned. It means climate fiction. I learned this like a week ago. So that leads us on to who'll be joining Markley in conversation this evening is Robbie Orvis. So Orvis is the lead author of Designing Climate Solutions, a policy guide for low carbon energy, and his research is regularly cited in the nation's top news outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Times. And he's a regular contributor to Forbes. So please join me in welcoming him to Politics and Prose, Stephen Markley and Robbie Orvis.
Hey. I thought we'd start with me just telling the story of sort of how I met Robbie and why we're in conversation right now. So I spent 10 years writing this book. We'll talk more about that part. But towards the end of it, I was kind of just after every single person I could find, badgering scientists, policymakers, like anybody I could think of to get input on what I had written. And, you know, the book is dense with science, policy. And I was just looking for anyone to help. So I had read Designing Climate Solutions, which is a very wonky book. And I'd sort of utilized it a lot in writing the policy section. So I eventually got in contact with Hal Harvey, who is an author of the book and the head of energy innovation. And he was nice enough to talk with me for about an hour. Very busy guy, didn't have enough time to read my entire 900-page novel, or at that time, I think it was like 1,200 pages. And so I sort of was communicating with Sarah Spangeman. And she was nice enough to read the whole thing and give me some feedback. And then she was like, you really should talk to this guy, Robbie. He works for us. He's like the smartest person here. He is the guy you want to talk to. So I got in touch with Robbie and just sort of sent him this initial climate, like it's an op-ed written by, not actually written by, but written by Al Gore, James Hansen, and Bill McKibben in the future, right? And I sent it to him just to get his input on it. Like, if we're at 2028 and not enough has been done, what do you think about this? And Robbie said to me something that he might not remember, but I will never forget, and that I will carry with me for the rest of my life, which is, what's your background in climate policy? Like, have you worked on this at the international level for 10 years? And I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest compliment. So fuck the New York Times. I don't care. It's Robbie Orvis's little comment in our Zoom that I will take with me. But anyway, so I eventually talked him into reading the entire thing. So if there's any inaccuracies, it's his fault, and you can blame him. And that's the story. I don't know how you.
Is that what I just signed away?
Yeah, that was the document back there. What was it like? Well, I mean, when I contacted you, what were you sort of?
Yeah, I mean, I was. I think I had the other side of that reaction where I said, "My God, there's a fictional writer who wants to talk about the ins and outs of climate policy. I better tune in." And it was a long time ago, 900 pages ago, so my memory isn't quite as good. But I thought it was great to weave these, critical points on policy, climate policy, into a fictional book and help educate and raise the level of conversation on policy.
So just to say, like, never answer an email from me, or you'll have to read a 900-page book. That's really important to remember.
It's true.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So I do remember early on when we were introducing ourselves, you had told me you'd been working on this book for, I think, over a decade. Which, my goodness, congratulations on getting it out. And I was kind of wondering, a lot has changed on climate technology. We have electric vehicles now. We didn't really have those 10 years ago. Solar prices are down 90%. You can tell that I walk out on this stuff. And so I'm just wondering, as you worked on the book over the decade, what changed for you as you wrote the book, and what kept you motivated to pick climate and write about climate change and go from there?
Yeah, it was, it's sort of keeping my eye on the ball of, what are the major trends? Like, that was the thing that was going to carry the book through the whole time, right? Climate was still going to be an issue no matter what happened in that intervening decade. But a lot of the when I first started the book, a lot of it was animated by the failure of Waxman-Markey, the cap and trade bill in the Obama years, and sort of that really felt like an important moment because the decade at that point was lost as Republicans gained control of Congress. And so a lot of the book was written in that period when it felt as if the climate movement had fractured and sort of everybody was looking around wondering what was going to come next, right? And so the book really reflects that period. And I had to do the edits, unfortunately, right as the Biden administration was attempting to tackle this issue. I don't know if you want to dive right into that, but the animating force of the book was sort of the inaction of the 2010s.
Yeah, I mean, that does take us up to the Inflation Reduction Act. So when we started talking, we were talking Build Back Better, and we have some emails we can go look back with some words that I can't say here throughout the process. And so, yeah, I mean, getting through all of that, and then the Inflation Reduction Act passing, which is the most significant climate legislation in U.S. history, is going to put us a long way to meeting, although not all the way, to meeting the U.S.'s climate goals. I mean, how did that factor in at such a late stage also? Yeah,
so I had what is called fourth pass in publishing. It's first pass, second pass, third pass, fourth pass. It looks like the book. It's in a PDF. I had fourth pass. I was trying to figure out, I had certain sentences that bridged what happened in the Biden-Harris administration. The book begins in our recent recognizable past. It goes through to 2040, and it elides the present. It's like our present moment is just gone in the book, right? And so I had these sentences that I was like waiting to figure out what the Biden administration was going to be able to accomplish. And Joe Manchin at some point said, I'm done, like where there's no climate bill. So I was like, all right, well, I'll turn the book in like this. At least it all still makes sense. And then the bill passed. And so I was like, well, first sobbing with relief that it had. And then like these fucking Democrats always screwing me. Just absolutely making my book inaccurate in certain sentence level things. No, but I think what you had helped me to do was I had at least the idea of what was possible in that moment, which is a bill that would be all carrots, that would basically throw money at decarbonization without any significant like carbon pricing or standards or anything else, right? And so I could at least make the policy somewhat line up in the future with it. But if you get the next edition of the book, it is going to have sentences that acknowledge the Inflation Reduction Act, the war with Russia and Ukraine, which I got wrong, was in 2035 in my book, sorry. So so that I guess that's just a pitch to buy the next edition as well. All right.
Also, just never read his books because what he writes comes true. So
very freaky. Yeah,
it's a little terrifying. Speaking of which, so some people have referred to the book as dystopian, and we talked a bit about this. And so I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, even my publisher, and I just disagree. I think dystopia gives us this idea of, we're all wandering through a wasteland, like beaming each other in the head with cans of soup, right? I think the book really reflects exactly what is happening and what will continue to happen in terms of violent weather, extreme politics, and a political system that is not, even as it can respond in some ways, is not responding with the necessary speed. I also think that, I worked very hard to make sure the book feels like our lived reality and not this sort of science fiction future. So I keep calling it's a topian book. It's not dystopian. It's not utopian. It is just a reflection of the moment we are in.
So along those lines, there are, in addition to climate change themes, there's other themes of major issues running through, especially American society these days. And I was just curious kind of what drew you to incorporate. It seemed like you made an attempt, in my reading, to incorporate almost all the bad things that are happening. And so I just, what kind of drew you to incorporate all those other aspects beyond climate change, gun violence, issues with drugs, and all of those issues?
Yeah, I mean, even more so than being a novel about the climate crisis, it's a novel about sort of America in this moment. And by this moment, I mean sort of my adult lifetime, the 2010s and onward. I think a lot of that has been defined by a certain extremity to our politics, particularly on the political right, and sort of an entertainment and information system that is geared toward controversy, conflict, and generally upsetting everyone to the maximum availability of that medium, right? And so I think, the book has interstitial moments that utilize news headlines, very John Dos Passos, right? But it also is like Dos Passos as filtered through the scrim of social media and surveillance capitalism. So we're getting all these headlines and these news bites with no context. We're not sure if this is conspiracy theory or actual reality, if this headline's coming from the Washington Post or, whatever the future Breitbart is. And I think that is an attempt to sort of give us this 360-degree view of this future society I've created, but one in which that feels just totally uncomfortably, uncannily familiar.
So coming back to policy, a big part of the book and throughout it is the policy framework and the different climate policies. I'm wondering what you learned about climate policy, and also kind of how you're feeling about the book and where we are in the U.S. with the passage of IRA and what you think's working and what you think might not work.
I love it. I can't wait to answer this question. And I will ask you the same at the end. I spent 10 years just doing like a fake master's thesis in everything climate, right? And including, certain characters in the book have much more extreme views than others about what we should be doing, and looking at those ideas, the sort of Andreas Malm approach. And to me, it was, it really was getting deep into the weeds, the Designing Climate Solutions textbook of, okay, this is such a complex technocratic problem that it's sometimes hard for lay people like me to approach. It's impossible to overstate how much building codes matter, which is like not a very thrilling narrative thing to invest in your novel, but is really important. And so just making sure I understood all those concepts. And so when you get to the policy, there's a big policy section at the end that my editor was like begging me to cut down and cut down and cut down. And I was like, no.
That was my favorite part.
Yeah, exactly. This is for the geeks out there. This is, Yeah, and it was just making sure that I had a grasp of all of that. And that even if the reader is getting to that section and they're like, oh my God, this is dense, they're still seeing, no, but these ideas exist. Like we understand the steps A, B, C, and D we need to be doing. And I think that hopefully will infect the reader with a sense of purpose in terms of these solutions do exist. We have every tool we need to begin rapidly decarbonizing the global economy. And it's a matter of creating the social and cultural will to push our political leaders over the brink. And to answer the second part of your question, having spoken with you so much, when the IRA passed, I really was like dazed. I mean, like I almost couldn't believe it because it is at its, at the bottom of it, such a good bill. I, however, also have the novelist's fear about those reactionary forces that I write about in the book and how far they will go and what they will do to delay implementation of it, right? And I think we're seeing that right now as, the proxies of the fossil fuel industry go around the United States say, no, you don't want this solar farm. You don't want these wind turbines fucking up your view, like just finding every tool in the tool bag to try to stop it. And so I think without eventually doing something that is going to degrade the political power of the fossil fuel lobby, we're going to be fighting these rearguard actions for a long time.
Yeah, I think just building on that, there were a lot of things that were very forward-looking and prescient in the book. But one thing I thought was particularly interesting is how the rise of this kind of local solar movement, and it happens to be mostly in red states and conservative areas. And not that anyone other than us wonks follows this, but a lot of the announcements of new clean energy and electric vehicle manufacturing plants and battery plants that have happened since the Inflation Reduction Act are in red states and in conservative districts. And so it's really interesting to see in your book, and then what's happening now and what might happen over the next decade is how the narrative and framing on clean energy and clean energy jobs changes as these facilities go into conservative districts and areas that have typically not been supportive of climate policy.
No, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, what I loved about the IRA was that it takes the lessons of the defense industry and just spread your investments in as many places as possible and make it politically very difficult to pry clean energy out of the economy. And yeah, I think like the ultimate dream is, there's a decarbonization or a direct air capture plant that opens in Wyoming, and suddenly it's really hard to not believe in climate change if your job is tied to pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. So.
Yeah, I know that's a stated goal of the Biden administration is putting these facilities in those districts. So I guess one final thought there on kind of your takeaway from policies. What do you hope your readers take away reading the book, reading about the policies that folks can do to address climate?
Yeah, I want to give a long-winded answer to that. I think like what I hope people take away from the book is that they are sufficiently terrified, first of all. Sometimes I think that there are plenty of people sufficiently terrified, and then I'm having conversations where I'm like, oh, people are conflating the climate crisis with the ozone hole. And I'm just like, oh, no, you don't understand anything that's happening. Okay, good. And I just think there is a level of consciousness raising that still needs to happen on that front because the implications of this thing really are that scary. At the same time, I would like people to take away from it that there is still time and there is still so much vital work that can be done to arrest the worst consequences. And really, beyond that, beyond slowing and eventually stopping the climate crisis, to actually build a more just society out of this, to use these new technologies and these new tools to create a country and a world that is more fair and just and equitable and prosperous. I think that's something that often bugs me is environmentalism is sort of jammed in with like what we're taking away from people or what we want to stop, but that's entirely the wrong way to look at it. It's about creating a world with abundant energy that is not polluting our lungs and destroying the atmosphere.
So the scene for me that stuck with me after reading the book is, and perhaps I grew up in Los Angeles and from California, so the fire scene in LA Couldn't put it down, maybe because it was jogging my memory of growing up with fires in Malibu and stuff. But I just was wondering kind of what went into that. It's such an intense part of the book.
I had this idea for a scene, and not to give away too many spoilers, but basically there's a character who has to head into this fire to rescue somebody. And I was sort of in the planning stages on it, living in Los Angeles around, I forget which year. I think it was 2016 or 2017. And I had it sort of planned with like, yeah, it'll be up in the hills in Malibu where like the fires are normally. And then some fires broke out in the city, and everybody got this text message on their phones that effectively said like, hey, be ready to evacuate in the middle of the night in case this fire comes racing down into where you live. And I was like, whoa, that's terrifying, right? And so at that point, my idea of like the scene became way more Hollywood. It became like, okay. And we've talked about this in terms of the book where, it has these big epic moments in it. And it's definitely taking the possibilities of extreme weather to the extreme of what is plausible. But also to me, I was like, this needs to be both exciting, visceral, and sort of like shock you up in your chair while you're reading it, right? And then also I was just telling a reporter this today, and it was like this sense of, well, I don't want reality to ever beat my novel in like the next 5 years, right? So I don't want to like write this and then like, oh, the fire was worse and I lose, right? And so there are several edge events, let's call them, that are pretty spectacular. But then in the course of editing the book, this heat wave breaks out in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm looking at the temperatures of this, and it's like, should I change every temperature in my book to reflect this way more terrifying event that just occurred? And that's the way it's felt writing it, is that what is happening keeps outpacing the horrifying future I'm trying to scare people with. So
I think mission accomplished. Although some of the weather events from this last year, again, after reading your book, these things kind of, some of them came true. So
yeah, it's weird, right?
It's weird, yeah. All throughout this, we would be exchanging notes about policy and weather events and stuff, and I think we had pretty much by then dismissed the IRA, Build Back Better, than happening, but it seemed like every 6 months something in there happened. I mean,
even right before the book came out, there's a horrifying winter storm in Christmas that kills people and grounds travel and all that, and we got it this year, and it's just like, the atmospheric rivers in California play a role in the book, and it's it's not any particular clairvoyance, obviously. It's just like I spent a lot of time looking at the trends and looking at what scientists are freaked out about, and be like, oh, that's a great plot point. I'll put that in.
So there's lots of characters in the book as well, and I'm wondering if if you resonated in particular, again, without trying to give away too much, but if any of the characters in particular resonated with you especially.
Yeah, I'll pause right here to say we're making the book sound very sciencey and dense, but my mom basically took over the stage in Cincinnati at my book tour stop, and she was like, I really need to tell you, it's quite a thriller. Like, you're really gonna. And then she talked about it for like 5 minutes, and I was like, Mom, it's my stage, please. But it is character driven, and I think like that's what if you haven't read it and you're on the fence about buying it, what I'd like you to take away is that. It is about the science, it is about the policy, but it's so much about the human beings who inhabit this world. And they're all different in that they have different views of what's happening, including one particular character who not only doesn't believe in climate change, but doesn't even care, like one way or the other, if it's happening or not. And I think rendering his perspective for me was one of the challenges of the book, but also one of the more sort of exciting viewpoints to be in, because all this stuff is happening around him. He's experiencing these weather events on the ground in a very visceral and terrifying way, and yet that's not what his life's about. He has other concerns, and I think looking into that person's soul and spending so much time with him was kind of gives the book this interesting shade that it otherwise wouldn't have had.
All right, so you've designed the policy framework building on the IRA and incentives. What do you think? Will it work?
Well, what work?
Will the framework for policy that's in the book, will it do the job? Will it save the
Oh,
planet?
yeah, my policies will. Yeah. 100%. We get the shot collar going, we'll be all set. Yeah. Yeah. I hope so. I think that's, I said this on, I was on Seth Meyers, actually. No, I said this on Seth Meyers. I think we often view this crisis in, it is really scary, as I said. But also, I keep coming back to this idea that, like, there really isn't a better time to be alive when, you live in a democracy, your hands are on the levers of your society, you have a voice, you have a chance to make a difference. And what we do, especially in the next 7 years, as we try to peak global emissions and begin bringing them rapidly down, this is going to echo for effectively the eternity of human civilization. And so, we really are living in a moment that not a lot of people have gotten a chance to live through and to affect that kind of great change.
I mean, just to add to that, I think it's one of the first climate fiction books that's also, I mean, we've talked a lot about how tied it is to what's happening, both from a policy and then what's happening to our climate and weather and stuff. And so it's just it's one of the first books to really tie the narrative to real policy, but in a fictional way.
Yeah, I mean, that was always the goal. Was this is a book about climate straight to the eye. Like, this is about the decisions we have to make on the very granular level, and not to hide behind Deus Ex Machinas of, socialist utopias breaking out or just pure dystopia. It's just looking at what we're living through now and trying to extrapolate, but also offer that other path, the choice to change the route we're on.
All right, so I know 10 years or so. How long exactly was it?
Yeah, it started in 2010,
Okay.
so, finished up the final edits in 2022.
Okay, 12 years.
A cool 12 years.
So, and to cap it off, you're winding up your book tour. So, what's next? What comes after this book?
I am going to sleep for 2 weeks when I get home. I have a new 2-book deal with Simon & Schuster, so that's cool. I went from, like, begging them to take Ohio and give it a chance to selling books I've barely thought of yet. So it's quite the swing. And yeah, I'm just super grateful that this thing I've been working on is out and alive, and I'm going to, do whatever anyone asks me to try to, I always think of it as like we're all in this position to lower our shoulder and do what we can, right? And so this is what I know how to do. This is what I'm good at, and using that as kind of a springboard to hopefully get people to care about it the way I care about it.
Well, I'm bought in, but I'm biased.
Thanks, Robbie. Are we going to do, you want to do questions? Yeah, we're going to do questions from the audience. I would love a deep, wonky policy question for Robbie, too.
Oh, I don't have, okay.
No, you ask your question.
Okay, I'm not a climate scientist, but I haven't read your book yet, and thank you for writing your book. It's a deeply important book, clearly, and to be able to animate people into caring, and particularly about the wonky policy issues, because most people see that as something that they don't relate to. But my question is more like, have you looked at rapid climate change? Because I've followed climate policy for quite a while. Most people are in complete denial about the possibility of even rapid climate change, and they see it in terms of, that won't happen for at least another 100 years plus, conveniently. Episodes during the Younger Dryas and the North Atlantic conveyor belt, the crucial elements of those kinds of things. Do you include those in the books, or could you write about those in the future so that we can educate people?
You're going to love this book. As soon as you crack that cover, you're going to be greeted by a chapter called The Phase Transitions of Methane Hydrates, right? Okay. And I use methane hydrates in the book just as like the example of one of these things built into the Earth systems that if we trigger it, it's going to be really fucking bad. Really. And so that sort of hangs over the novel in this very subtle way as sort of this sword of Damocles. And yeah, it definitely engages with all the terrifying scenarios that are. You won't not be scared by that.
Because in the film, what's it called, the one about New York?
That super piece of garbage, Day After Tomorrow.
Well, people dismiss that And yet it was, as bad as it was an attempt to at least envisage rapid climate change. And whether that's fiction or not, I'm not saying we should scare the living daylights out of people necessarily, but there are factual scientific bases for worrying about rapid climate change, right?
Sure, of course.
Can you tell me what you might want to do in the future with that? Can you make a film, for example?
Well, I'm in Hollywood right now just trying to work on this. So, yeah, we'll go from there. But, yeah, I think that is one of the alarming things that, gets bounced around by scientists. But, yeah, what if we set off one of these, yeah, and that would be really bad. So we should stop this as soon as possible so we don't have to risk that.
I mean, I think we've talked a bit about how some of the events in the book are, maybe when you wrote them, they seemed extreme. But we had a heat wave last year that literally no model predicted was physically possible, even the most extreme models. And so, even for me, as someone who works on this, reading through the book, at times I was like, wow, that's really bad. That's bad. That's worse than I think is going to happen. But then we're already seeing it. So I think those themes, to some extent, are captured in some of the extreme nature of some of the weather events in the book.
Yeah. And just to say, like, one of the reasons I wanted to stay away from sort of the day after tomorrow scenarios is because then you're tipping over into, sort of science fiction dreck, right? Yeah, it's like hard to do that and then keep any realistic framework on it. And I wanted the book to be as deeply realistic as possible. Other questions? Yes.
I was curious.
Do the microphone? Oh, shit. Sorry, I don't want to be the microphone police. They're asking.
No, I think what really fascinates. By the way, excellent talk. Thank you very much. I wonder if we could think more of the social sciences and if you could connect the dots between growing up in rural Ohio and being in LA and the connection and disconnection between cities and rural and the subject of that you're talking about as a whole.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's like nothing new. Like the rural urban divide goes back to probably like the first time there was an urban center in Mesopotamia, right? Like it's like this is always like the political issue that undergirds everything. I think what Robbie said earlier is something I've thought about a lot, which is, I grew up in a town where there's a natural gas, they make equipment for natural gas. And so obviously when people's livelihoods are tied to something like that, they're ideologically incredibly rigid about the future. And I think, again, what the IRA does that is so smart is begin to spread out those technologies so that people's livelihoods are tied to decarbonization. And that is going to be such a key element of this battle going forward. Being out in LA, it's like, I mean, you grew up there, it's disgusting. I mean, it's like I go running there and I'm like, I'm just destroying my lungs by running by this freeway. So it's not like Los Angeles doesn't need this as badly as rural Ohio.
I think just to like get weedsy for a minute, to your point, the Inflation Reduction Act, some of it is designed that if you build things in energy communities, which is like where a coal plant closed or a coal mine closed, you get a whole bunch of extra money. And so there's a lot of places in the legislation where that's the case. And so I really, I think you're right that a big part of what's trying to be accomplished with the bill is obviously to help those communities that have been transformed and will be transformed. But also, I mean, there's an undeniable correlation between those communities and certain political party, and also with rural versus urban America. So, I know I just had a call with someone today that is a clear hope of the bill is that it will spread the benefits of climate policy around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely somebody who doesn't think like this is going to be one with 50+1 voting for the rest of time. Like that can't happen. Like this has to eventually crack something open in the Republican Party. I know that sounds crazy right now, but we have to get to a point where people cannot do anything but run for clean energy because that's what's in their district. That's what that's where their campaign finance is coming from. And the faster we get there, the faster we can change the politics of this. Other question?
Yes, good job.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the writing process. So you started this in 2010. Your novel Ohio came out in 2018. It's my understanding that you were working on this, set it aside for a little while to write that novel, and then return to this. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
So what was the process like of inhabiting the scale and scope of this world with these characters, and then putting it aside, creating a whole new, a whole new world with new characters, and then returning to this? What was that process for you like as a writer, and why did you decide to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I just have always kind of worked on a couple different things at once. And this book was I could do it in such an incremental way because each chapter is kind of its own self-contained world. And so I was at the Iowa Writers Workshop kind of working on both of these, and I just understood the Deluge was going to take me way longer. Like, I felt like I was like, after part 2, when you have 600 pages, you're like, okay, this is going to be a project, right? So Ohio was just... it was the book I thought I could finish faster. And it was the one that I, was getting good reactions from my peers and my professors. So I, spent time with that and struggled to get it out. But when it finally did, I remember I was on the phone with my editor. And if a literary book has a good first sales week, your agent's like, sell 9 more books, sell everything. Get any money you can. It's all going away. It's done. And... I was talking to him, and he was like, I don't know, man. Like, near future climate epic, like, this is nothing like Ohio. Like, this is not what, I don't know. This is really risky. Maybe you should think about this. And it just, like, sort of came out of my mouth. I was like, no. Like, Ohio was the book I wrote to write this one. This is the one I care about. This is the one that I, have spent my entire life working towards. And hopefully that's reflected in the novel, that it is, like, a work of deep passion. So as soon as I had the chance to get back to it, I think the specific chapter was sort of the third Matt and Kate chapter, Years of Rain and Thunder. And I just had this, like, reading it, I was like, I had to scrap the whole thing because the whole fucking world had changed by then. It was post 2016. But I felt like, oh my God, thank God I'm back with these characters. And from there it was like 2 years and it was done. So it really was like, I was animated by, it was the thing I cared about. I just knew it would take so much longer. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
I'm a real rambler sometimes. I apologize.
Thank you. I can't wait to read the book. And my question is, I'm very curious because I'm guessing you've given the book already to be read to trusted people, but I'm asking if you've also given it to the non-converted, someone that already, I'm not saying denies it, but if they've gone through it, what's the reaction been? What kind of comments you've gotten from people that have really read it or been involved in this process?
That is a great question and a great idea. But if it does change a few minds, that would be incredible. That'd be very special. But I'm not staying up like late at night, staring at the ceiling over it. Other questions? Yeah.
So, I worked at EPA for 20 years. I've been retired for 5.
Thank you for your service. Yeah.
Thank you. I've been retired for 5 years. I left when the other one was president. I couldn't do my sworn oath anymore to serve at his pleasure. So anyway, we were back last week, and my branch is implementing for EPA the IRA, but I know nothing about it anymore. So it's exciting, and they're really excited. All the agencies, of course, in government have been eviscerated by the former guy. A lot of intelligence, a lot of institutional knowledge is gone. I ran the acid rain trading program, and with a number of my, we were in the cap and trade business, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I'm interested. You frame your novel as fiction, and then you say you don't want it to go to the science fiction direction. And I was wondering, unfortunately, I haven't read your book yet, but I did read Kim Stanley Robinson's book, The Ministry of the Future. Did you read that one?
I did not read that one.
Interesting. Okay. We don't have anything to talk about, sorry. I did, and you
This
didn't,
is like
but-
every date I've ever had, so.
Yeah. So, pick it up sometime. Did you read it?
It's sitting on my shelf at home.
Anyone read it? What's the title? The Ministry for the Future, Kim Stanley Robinson. Sorry, I'm not. I'm not as anything, but it's interesting. I was just wondering how you thought about it in comparison to.
I've read some of his other. I read New York 2140 and some other works of his, but I've not read that one. I was reading a lot of climate fiction as I was like seeing what the competition was, and then thank you for your work at EPA too.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks so much for being here.
No, thank you.
I just stumbled in, but I'm a surgeon trying to change careers and become a writer, influencing health policy. So it's really germane to what you're doing.
Yeah, totally.
But I wonder if you'd talk to a lot of us here who'd like to become writers. You've been successful. You're doing a great job. But tell us about, when I looked at your bio, I was interested in your book, your breakthrough book, on buy this book. It was really interesting.
I will speak to that. I wouldn't call it my breakthrough book because only like my mom and not even my Uncle Dave read it. So, no, I was living in Chicago. My former roommate's right back there, actually. Hey, Pat. I just had this weird idea. I wanted to write a book about being a young writer attempting to publish a book. And it definitely is the work of a 25, 26-year-old, for sure. And I ended up finding an agent and getting it published at sort of a smaller press. And it was really, really exciting. I thought like, this is it. I've done it. I've made it. But instead of making it, I was just freelancing and running out of money and racking up credit card debt and kind of not going anywhere. And I think that is the other part of your question, is that this writing thing is really, really hard. And it requires a thick skin, and you get a lot of rejection, and it's very grueling. It's really emotionally grueling. Even when I was at Iowa, which is just full of people who are brilliant and talented and constantly succeeding, you're still like, butting your head up against the difficulty of actually getting something published. And if you get something published, then you're butting your head against the difficulty of getting anybody to read it, or getting anybody to review it. Sometimes you're hoping for a bad review because at least that means somebody read it. And so the whole career is just this sort of constant like slog. And that's why right now, for instance, when I'm on this book tour and getting good notice for it, I am not taking it for granted, because like I did the years when nothing was working, and nobody was reading me. So my advice when I used to teach was just, if you really want to do it, it's perseverance. It's sort of getting that rejection letter and just slogging on and to keep going. I don't really have much beyond that. I think it's otherwise you can read on the internet how to find an agent, how to find a publisher. Like those steps are all available. It's sort of it's the spiritual element of like, can you keep going when everybody has told you no for 5 years or 10 years or whatever it might be? Does that help? Probably not. Other questions? Yeah.
I heard you interviewed on Dave Roberts.
I love Dave Roberts, yeah.
He's great. Volt's podcast, if you're not a subscriber yet. So I know, and Robbie, we've met before. I'm Mike Tidwell, director of Chesapeake Climate Action Network.
Oh, okay.
So I know, I haven't read your book yet, but I know you describe activists are in your book. Can't wait to read about that. I've been one of those activists for the last 20 years, trying to get state level policies passed in the region, building up to the IRA. And then, we all finally got the Holy Grail. But in this conversation and in your book, apparently, even before 2022, you describe these extreme weather events. They're happening much faster than anyone imagined, and they're still happening. And I wonder if you think, as I do, frankly, that the IRA came too late. Clean energy alone is not going to save us. We can't afford to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. So what about reflecting sunlight from the planet and those ideas, which are very controversial on the far left?
Well, they're in the book.
They're in the book. Okay.
You should read the
Please.
book.
I will, but please discuss.
You're going to love this book. No, like I told Robbie earlier, it's like I took every element of this seriously, including that we are too late. I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but by the end of the book, people are talking wartime mobilization, albedo modification, all these things that sound real sci-fi or, sort of out there right now, but may be necessary. We'll see. And I think it was important in creating that final crisis, which is, this isn't a spoiler. It's about sea level. It has a lot to do with sea level. In creating that final crisis, it's like, okay, I have built this fictional scenario, which is maybe scarily realistic, built this future scenario. Now, what would we actually do if this happened? And so from that point forward, I had to go searching for all these answers. So I was talking to people who worked in managed retreat and albedo modification and all these other sort of things right now that are on the fringes of the conversation, but that could suddenly become totally the center. And so, yes, the answer is yeah. You're going to love this book. So you're going to love this book back there too. This is going to be, yeah. Other questions?
Hi, really excited to be here. I'm sort of, I think, as a lot of people are with the climate crisis, I teach environmental science, and so I'm sort of on the front lines, but not really. I don't know as much as someone who works at the EPA or something like that. But I vacillate between being really hopeful about communities being able to address this and just wanting to go buy a farm in the middle of Iowa or something like that. And I'm wondering where you do you have days where you just want to parable of the sower it and go somewhere with only a couple friends, or do you think that a community can really come together and?
Well, I think not Parable of the Sower, which is that's a classic book, but there's a lot of dystopian fiction that paints this kind of just this fucking stupid idea of hypermasculine men getting their guns and guarding a small plot of land in order to secure their future, and that is the thrust of so much dystopian fiction that it drives me crazy. Mm-hmm. And obviously, the only answer to this and the only answer to any transnational, incredibly complex problem is community. It's community, not just at that local level, but building up to our fucked up, crazy country. And I think that's the problem is it has to be such a ground up and bottom down piece of work that we're all invested in. So yeah, I have no interest in farming. If the breakdown happens, and I have to dig a hole, fuck that. I'm out. But I am very interested in what the climate crisis means about, our relationships with each other, not just in this room or with our families, but sort of, California to Texas to Ohio to every other place I've ever lived, and what it means globally. And I think one of the hopeful things I find about sort of the clean energy revolution that's happening is there's an opportunity for the global south to skip a whole era of development that's going to poison their water and air and to really push the whole planet forward into a more just configuration. I'm not saying that's guaranteed, but I think that opportunity is there, and we shouldn't ignore that. Yeah.
Thank you.
All set. Yes, sir. This guy.
I haven't read the Deluge yet, but man, thanks for putting in the work for the characters on Ohio.
You're welcome.
It wasn't just a random tale. These characters were real, and I like that you explained that this particular character who had different viewpoints from you in this book, we should expect some interesting things. And I'm expecting these characters to be as, well written as the characters in Ohio. But Ohio was a bit grim in the, and had a tragic turn, and a believably tragic turn for some characters from a rural area, and I think from much of the United States. It was very believable, although that was a serious example. Are we to believe that in this book, some of these characters, maybe with the methodological advance of the government implementing various climate action in communities, that there is hope for some change, even though some characters who maybe are so ideologically stuck in the way they are wouldn't normally change. Are we to see a little hope at the end of the tunnel here?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. My goal was always that this book would not flinch from what was happening, and that includes sort of bringing the violence of our planetary situation into the personal realm, so that the violence, our systems are inflicting upon the Earth is represented in the violence human beings can do to each other. And so a book that doesn't flinch, but also one that does not despair. Yeah. And I think that was an important balance for me to strike, and I had it in my head with every chapter. Like this has to be truthful, but not nihilistic. Yeah. And that was always the overriding principle. And I think, I use that word because randomly, like somebody pops up on Instagram, they're like, Markley's nihilistic classic Ohio. And I was like, Ohio is not nihilistic. It's about, the situations I saw as a young person growing up, not anything in particular, but just sort of the sensation. And I think reflecting that sometimes scares people. And so they toss a label onto it that is, I feel, not right. Sure. And so if people finish reading The Deluge and think it is about, humans are a virus and we're all screwed and there's nothing we can do, then they are reading it wrong, and we need more English majors in the world. That's
Thanks.
Yeah. That guy who just asked the question, he's actually a sailor. And so when I was 27, I got wind of, you guys might remember this, the BP oil spill. Remember that? So I got wind of this this vessel going into the Gulf after that to go study whales and the effect of the oil on whales. And so as I badgered Robbie, badgered that scientist into letting me on the ship, and Jack Bailey was a sailor on it. And so we had a good time chasing whales in the Gulf until we got blown into the port of Fushan in a storm. And then we drank beers on a piece of concrete there, and went to New Orleans, and it was a whole escapade. So he just showed up, and I was like, this is crazy. You never know you're going to get fans, Yeah, come on.
We got two.
I have one question, but it's more like a little comment, because I went to Audible, the Amazon audiobook service, and it says in the bottom, under your book, it says, you may also enjoy The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson.
Okay.
What do you feel about that?
About that? Well, I read that book. I guess, but that book is it's basically about Buddhism. It's not about not giving a fuck. It's about giving a fuck about the right things. So, yeah. Did you?
Yeah. This is a very illustrious bookshop, and many very brilliant people have come here over the years, sitting in the audience. Deepest respect for all the people who show here all the time. If you had the opportunity to really speak your mind to the people in DC, the policymakers, the administrators, the policy officers, the heads of agencies, and others right now, if you had free reign, what would you like to be telling them right now? Because you're sitting literally in the belly of the beast here.
You're on camera.
Yeah, I know. You can't actually let my words fly. No. But I think I've said everything in this novel. That's what I would say. Read my novel. Buy multiple copies of my novel. Friends, family, makes a great gift in every situation. I think the reason I wrote the book is it's because it distills the essence of what I believe about this crisis. How many people have gotten in front of Congress since James Hansen in 1988 and been like, hey, this is a problem, I just don't think, at least for me, that is not the best use of my ability, is to badger people about things they already know. I think for me it was using storytelling and narrative to help people understand the stakes and to reorient us emotionally to what's happening. I think that is one of the hardest leaps, and it's the reason that in every great, and I'm sorry, this is going to sound grandiose, and I'm trying not to make it, but in every great social movement, in every great change in history, there are a bunch of writers and poets and artists hanging around, being like, "Hey, I've got an idea," sort of leering at the situation, right? And it's because narrative has the power, and storytelling and art has the power to reorient us emotionally. And that was a goal of the novel, was how do I do that to people who are reading this book? So they should all read my book, is again my point. Any other questions? Time for one more. Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Could I end with a long question?
Yeah, of course.
I've been waiting for this all night. Bring it on.
I've been trying to wrap my head around like all the Twitter threads about a hydrogen gas, the PTC, production tax credit. It seems like it could get really scary if it's done the wrong way and like it starts being made from like electrolysis from like natural gas and stuff like that, or it could be really good. And what do you think might happen with that?
This is a great Robbie question.
Yeah, I've been training for this. I guess quickly, there's a tax credit in the IRA for the production of hydrogen, which is not a fuel that's widely used, perhaps best known in the Hindenburg. But there's new ways of producing it, some of which can be low carbon. But today, most of the hydrogen we use, which is used in refineries and other chemicals production, is produced by taking natural gas and breaking it down. And when you do that, you release a bunch of CO2. And so there's this new tax credit that is designed to give a credit based on how clean you can produce that hydrogen. And so there's a couple of different ways. You can also, water is H2O. You can split it through electrolysis to also make it. The devil's in the details. So as you mentioned, there are lots of ways that tax credits can be combined. And some of those, if there's not careful guidance in place, could lead us to a situation where there's a lot of hydrogen production and it's not necessarily produced cleanly. And so your question is really relevant. The Treasury Department is taking comments on guidance right now. But a concern we have and other folks also have is making sure that if we're going to produce hydrogen, that we do it as cleanly as possible, and that we don't use hydrogen for things where electricity might do just as well and a lot cheaper and a lot cleaner.
Thank you.
That's the question everybody wants to end the book on. That's exactly the green hydrogen, blue hydrogen divide. Yeah, no. Thank you so much for coming out, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say thank you.